Good evening from my part of the world. I'm in the Netherlands. Good morning in California, and good day everywhere in between. Welcome to this webinar that we're going to focus on Stop Hate for Profit. This is co-organized by the Cyber Policy Center at FSI at Stanford, but I also want to do a shout out to the Wonks and Techies student group that I've been working with for the past couple of months. We had initially taken on the initiative to invite Jessica and David to share some of their experiences with the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, which I think has really been drawing a lot of attention from all over the world, not least by advertisers in the United States. A very, very successful initiative by the civil rights movement. But certainly when I assess global responses to this campaign to really put a halt to the spread of hatred and racism, all the kind of negative, hateful content that can have very free and fertile ground on social media platforms like Facebook. It is remarkable that we have an opportunity today to really engage with Jessica and David. So welcome. I'm very happy that you've been able to join us in what no doubt is a time full of Zoom calls and Teams meetings and a lot of screen time. So I particularly appreciate you taking the time to join us today. What we agreed is that Jessica and David will share some of their introductory thoughts on why Stop Hate for Profit, where it stands right now, but also the ambitions that they have. And then the intention today is to have a very interactive discussion. So feel free to pose your questions in the chat function, and I will make sure that as many of you will have an opportunity to engage and get answers. So let me share a few words on our esteemed guests that I'm very happy to have found the time to join us as well. I'm sure it's been a whirlwind since this campaign took off. I'll start with introducing Jessica Gonzalez. She's a lawyer with a long time background in racial justice advocacy. She's with the Free Press organization, and she works with the executive team and key stakeholders to develop strategies to advance its mission. And she also wanted to make sure that I shared that obviously this campaign and the Stop Hate for Profit momentum would not have been possible without numerous organizations calling for this type of responsibility by Facebook and other social media companies, particularly those who've been part of the Change the Terms Coalition. And she can say more about her background if I've left out a number of key points in her impressive bio and CV. And then we'll turn to David Sifry, who actually has a background in technology. He is the vice president of the Center for Technology and Society, where he leads a team of innovative technologists, researchers, and policy experts. And after a long career in technology, entrepreneurship, he actually joined the Anti-Defamation League only last year. And I think it's really important to hear from him at both sides of this discussion, you know, from the technology world and also from the civil rights organization that he is with now, why he was so motivated to be part of the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, and why those two are not mutually exclusive. As an observer of the politics of Silicon Valley, I feel like sometimes it seems like innovation trumps everything in Silicon Valley, and the rights discussion is often pushed to the European side in terms of where, you know, regulation is more common, and where the question of how to make sure that innovation and rights can flourish has been part of the debate for a long time. But in Silicon Valley, it almost seems like those two are at odds with each other, and I'm happy to see whether we can look at how both can exist at the same time. So I've said more than enough. Welcome again. I'm happy to pass to Jessica for her thoughts. Thanks again.
Thanks, Maricha, and thank you so much to the Stanford Cyber Policy Center for having us here for this conversation. I'm Jessica Gonzalez. I'm the co-CEO of Free Press and the co-founder of the Change the Terms Coalition. And I've been doing anti-hate work for my entire legal career. And I've been connecting with individuals and groups of people who have been directly impacted by hate, who have seen the havoc that organized white supremacy is having on their communities and frankly on their ability to express themselves. So for far too long, I think our collective analysis of what a free press and what a free speech is has failed to account for the power dynamics around free speech. So for instance, for people of color and women of color in particular, our speech has never been free. It's always come at a cost. It's always come with a tale of harassment and hate and threats. And so when we look to what's happening in Silicon Valley and look to holding Facebook and other big tech companies accountable, we're really looking at that through the lens of, frankly, hundreds of individuals and organizations that have been on the other side of hate and harassment campaigns, and just how very chilling that is for advocacy for civil rights and for the speech of people who are targeted by that. So I carry their energy into this space. I carry the energy of the Change the Terms Coalition that's been organizing against hate and tech for several years now. And I carry that energy into the Stop Hate for Profit campaign. And what's been really exciting about that campaign for me is there's finally some accountability. There's an increased amount of attention on the harm that big tech, and in this case, Facebook, is doing because of lackluster policies on content moderation, a lackluster or non-existent civil rights infrastructure inside of the company, and frankly, a long-standing appeasement strategy with our groups. Stop Hate for Profits, started on July 1st, in earnest on July 1st of this year, but our communications with Facebook have dated back years and years for many of our organizations that are part of the campaign. And we've continued to ask for the policies that are lifted up on the stophateforprofit.org website. Our organizations have 10 demands that we're making of Facebook around civil rights, around auditing and transparency and content moderation policies and more. And this is not our first time making these asks. In many cases, we've been on the receiving end of an appeasement strategy where Facebook has wanted to do everything but actually make changes that keep people safer and maybe make them slightly less profitable. So it's been very exciting to watch with great interest how advertisers are starting to understand how problematic and how harmful it is to see their advertisements run against racist content, to see more news organizations picking it up, more allies coming to the fray to see how they can help with stopping hate for profit, because this has been a long road. And unfortunately, it took cutting into Facebook's bottom line and having them take a few hits on Wall Street for them to get a little more serious. Now, we still haven't seen any really meaningful commitments or timelines out of Facebook. I was at a meeting with Mark Zuckerberg a week ago today, alongside Derek Johnson at the NAACP and Rashad Robinson at Color of Change and Jonathan Greenblatt at ADL. And we were really disappointed. We were really disappointed that they did not come to the meeting ready to respond to our demands, ready to at least give a timeline of when they would be implementing changes to keep our communities at stake. And I emphasized at the meeting just how high the stakes are. This is literally a life or death issue for a lot of our communities. We know from the UN that Facebook played a determining role in the genocide in Myanmar. And we know it's quite possible. And in fact, there are forces using Facebook to organize, to legitimize and normalize mass atrocities all over the world, including here in Facebook's home state and Facebook's home country. You know, and I did raise with the Facebook crew the harm that's already been happening across our communities, in particular my community, the Mexican American community and the Latinx community, saw firsthand thousands and thousands of political ads dehumanizing brown people, dehumanizing immigrants, calling us invasion or an invasive species. And then almost a year ago, we see a deadly massacre in El Paso, Texas, where the gunman specifically went to shoot brown people, specifically went to kill immigrants, killed 22 people, injured dozens of others. And in his manifesto, he used the very same talking points and language that were running in political advertisements with a heavy circulation in Texas. And so I think it's really time for tech to think about what their responsibility is in this moment. What does it look like to use tech for good? You know, when Silicon Valley first became a thing, Google started with the "don't be evil." There was like this sense that like innovation is great. And now we're seeing that, yes, innovation is great. And we're calling on Facebook and other tech companies to be really innovative about the problems they're causing and the solutions that need to be brought to bear. So I've probably gone on long enough, and I guess I will kick it over to David at the ADL, but happy to be here in this conversation, appreciative for everyone who's tuning in, and can't wait to get to questions.
Thank you so much. Over to David indeed, and we'll come to questions. Thanks so much, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you again. Thanks, Marita and Jessica. Thank you. What a wonderful introduction to help our audience understand a little bit more about why there is so much urgency here. And, you know, frankly, I think all of us, all of the organizations that are represented here and in the larger Stop Hate for Profit Coalition, we've all been working with Facebook. This was not our first choice by any means. We have, and by the way, ADL still continues to, and I know that, you know, the other organizations still continue to work with Facebook and the other social media companies on a day-to-day basis, right? To help them to root out whatever hate they can find, right? If there's, whether it's a, you know, an advertisement that includes a Nazi symbol, right? That they're trying to figure out, do we need to take this down? You know, we still have these conversations, but this all belies the larger issue here. And what we're really talking about is a fact that the algorithmic amplification that is such a deep part of how Facebook continues to get you back, how Instagram continues to get you back, how WhatsApp, you know, helps you to stay connected. That this idea that, you know, that what you see in your news feed, okay, this is not a free speech issue. No one here is trying to deny anyone their rights to speak. And I mean, aside from the fact that Facebook is a private company, and, you know, if a Nazi was walking around goose-stepping inside of your local deli, inside of your local coffee shop, you know, the proprietor would have 100% right to kick that person out and say, we don't accept this. This does not go according to our values. We're talking about the exact same set of issues here, that, you know, Facebook is really showing us what values it is living by. And this is the opportunity for Mark Zuckerberg and for the rest of the team there to show, not through their talking, oh, this is hard, they say. Oh, this is difficult. We're working on this. Well, but show us through your actions. So stop recommending known white supremacy, conspiracy theory groups. Stop recommending anti-Semitic groups to literally tens of thousands of people. And we've shown this and said, this is how people get radicalized. Submit to regular third-party independent audits of how much hate and misinformation is actually going on side of the platform. I mean, it's wonderful that they're doing a lot of work on this, but right now they're grading their own homework. There is no one out there who is saying, you know what, Facebook isn't saying, come on in and help us to look at what we're actually missing on the platform. They love to say, oh, we work with civil society groups. We come to the Anti-Defamation League. We come to Free Press. We come to Color of Change. We come to NAACP, and we take your input when we think about community guidelines. But never once have they actually published the manuals that they use to train their teams. So this is just, it's disingenuous at this point. And so what we've done is we've said, look, these are not hard things. These are literally things. These 10 demands are things that Mark Zuckerberg could, with his signature, make happen, and make happen even in the month of July. I mean, look, even the airline companies have a phone number that you can call when they lose your luggage, when somebody, when you get put on the wrong flight, you can speak to a human being. But yet, why is it that when someone is a target of harassment on Facebook, there is no human being that you can actually come to speak to actually get your issues resolved? So we're not coming out there, we're not like trying to just throw bottles. We're saying, look, these are common sense changes that for a company that made $70 billion in revenue last year and $17 billion in earnings, we're not talking about all of a sudden bankrupting Facebook. What we're talking about here is making the changes that they need to make. You would never accept, if you were walking into your local sandwich shop, that 89% of the lettuce that they make, that's bad lettuce, is caught before it goes out to somebody who eats it. This is just, we would never, and yet that's how they operate when we are talking to them about hate speech. So our demands are very, very simple, and they're entirely executable. I know this because I've been involved in the social media space as an entrepreneur, as a nerd, as a geek, as a builder of companies here. These are not technical challenges. These are purely about resource allocation. And if they decide to change it, and what's so amazing is you have a company that has done incredible technical achievements, right? Created the most amazing marketing platform in the world, that to come and to then protect their own customers, their own users from hate and harassment, right? It's just some really simple stuff we're asking for. So I hope that they're going to make these changes, and we're going to continue to push and to help get the word out. Like, this isn't about technology, and it certainly isn't about free speech. This is about really just doing the right thing and living by common values that we all stand for.
I really love the lettuce analogy. I worked at the grocery store for many years. I put myself through college working a full-time job, stocking shelves. And I got to tell you, we took out the bad meat every morning. We tended to that because bad meat kills people. And I think, I don't mean to make light of this. I mean to say this whole 11% of hate going through is an unacceptable level of hate, especially given the scale at which Facebook is reaching people. It's really putting lives in danger.
Well, thank you for your very passionate pleas about why in so many ways it is common sense to say no to hatred, to neo-Nazi expressions. I mean, as a European, in many ways, it's a very welcome message to hear from the United States, because we, for a long time, and I used to be a member of the European Parliament, were struggling with, were we so exceptional in saying no to these hateful incitements, which I think is much more accepted as a position in Europe. And with the question of how do we make sure that the tech sector and technology companies, social media companies, get treated and regulated and scrutinized, held to account in the same way that, let's say, the car industry does, or the food industry, as you just mentioned, or as we're facing a pandemic, then I guess if a pharma company would say, well, 95% of our medicine is totally safe, people would be terrified, freaked out, lawsuits would happen. And so on the one hand, as I mentioned, it feels like what you're asking for is common sense. On the other hand, it is creating a momentum that has never been there before. So I wanted to ask, what makes you think that now is different? Is this related to a combination of factors between the political landscape in the United States, the Black Lives Matter movement, which has a lot of support and is hopefully going to create a more just society? What makes this moment more opportune than past moments, and what will it really take to change the terms? And I don't just mean the 10 points that are very clear in your campaign, but is this going to require grassroots engagement? Is it going to require regulation and hard law? Is it going to only be measured in the currency of the business model, meaning advertisements, stock market value, algorithmic accountability and transparency? I would love to take us a little bit deeper into why now and how can this momentum really be turned into more sustainable change? And then I'm seeing some questions coming into the Q&A section, so I'm very grateful for that. I'll turn to those in a second, but I'm very curious to know what will make now different and how the terms can actually be changed. Who do we look for to make it happen beyond this campaign and this boycott, which I think has been showing that there's more support than may have been anticipated and seen from the outside in the United States as well?
I'll start us off and then kick it over to David. I can't stress enough how critical the Black Lives Matter movement has been to our work. I don't think we're here without the incredible work of Black organizers that have made this issue so prominent, the issue of racism in the US, the issue of racism globally. Frankly, the people out in the streets during a global pandemic fighting for their lives, it's a pivot point where everyone in society, or ought to be, and many are, examining what is my organization's role in oppression? What is our institutions? What are our government's role in oppression? What's my role? Where have I been part of oppressive systems? And people are really, examining that more closely. And so I think the Black Lives Matter movement is an important part of this story. Here's the thing. We have regulations against bad meat because bad meat hurts everyone in the same way. We all die if we eat rotten meat. Unfortunately, in the realm of hate and harassment, that doesn't hit all people in the same way. It hits women, it hits people of color, it hits religious minorities, it hits LGBTQ people, people with disabilities, and others. But it hits historically oppressed people with a deeper and more deadly set of harms than the general population. And so it did take a waking up to the moment to, I think, spark the campaign. I think we're also, because of the pandemic, people are seeing the deathly effects of capitalism above all else, as if that is the only value that we should hold as a society. And that, the disinformation that is spreading over Facebook and other platforms is having deadly consequences. And so that's coming to the fore for people. And frankly, I think this conversation's been happening for a long time with a lot of folks who really understand that hate and disinformation have deadly consequences, but that it's just kind of reaching a larger audience now because of the uprisings, because of people seeing firsthand just how harmful and how necessary these platforms are. Like, Free Press is still on Facebook. We use it to communicate, with our members, with the grassroots folks who are, who show up and protest when companies like this do harm to people. So it's a necessary tool for many organizations, and that's why we're invested in making it a safer tool, and one where it is safe for women and people of color and others to come to. So next steps for us, we've been really excited about the global interest in this issue. In the past week alone, I've talked to 5 people in 5 different continents about the work of the Stop Hate for Profit campaign and the asks that we're making of Facebook. We do hope that advertisers will continue to join us. And we're also well aware that regulators are watching what's happening, that policymakers and academics and researchers and wonks and people inside the companies, frankly, are watching what's happening and imagining new possibilities. So the work carries on. The work never stopped and didn't start on July 1st, and it certainly won't end on August 1st, but it's been really exciting to see the momentum and attention, and I think we've raised the floor. The bar was really low. I just want to be clear, but I think we've raised the floor on what people should expect from big, powerful tech companies and billionaires who are essentially unaccountable to their customers. And when I say customers, I do mean the advertisers, but I also mean Facebook users who are expecting a better experience. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Dave if he has anything else to say.
I mean, Jessica, that was such a fantastically comprehensive, there isn't too much more to add. I'll say that to get back to Facebook is, and by the way, all of social media, like it has been an amazing, wonderful, remarkable force that has led to so many positive changes and such connection and so many families who are able to talk to each other and so many communities that are able to come together. But what we neglect here is that the responsibility that these companies have, and that frankly, they're abrogating here, in that this quest for engagement, this quest to get you to stay in front of the screen and hit like and hit share and get involved. Well, guess what? What it means is that things that are controversial, things that are polarizing, things that target the other, these things, and disinformation and misinformation galore, they spread so quickly because guess what? It gets people to click, it gets people to share, it gets people to hit like. And every additional minute that those people are sitting on these platforms, there's more advertising and there's more ways to market to them. So, for us, first off, you've got to pull away this idea that Facebook doesn't profit off of hate. That's a fallacy. Second is to look and to say, okay, how can we get very concrete that there are common human values here that we need to be shown, right? That Facebook, and I think the Facebook employees who are internal, like to be able to look and say, you know what, maybe it's not just about optimizing that last 0.1% of engagement, but maybe we need to really be asking ourselves, like, so how can we stop this spread of hate and change the way that we actually use the algorithm and use it more to eliminate misinformation and disinformation? And guess what that means? It means that you'll have slightly less engagement, but you'll also be doing the world a tremendous service to look at the real human lives that are affected, because polarization and victimization and misinformation does not affect the majority in the way that it affects these disenfranchised and minority groups. And so, we stand strongly with these folks who are being harmed, and this has to change.
Thank you so much. These are such powerful thoughts that you're sharing that a lot of questions have now come in. So I'm going to pull them a little bit in three, and I'll read them out and call out the people who asked them. So I'll start with David Jade. Lots of Davids on the webinar today. David asks, in terms of interventions, I know that Facebook employees have been advocating for more investment in listening and amplifying the voices of marginalized communities globally. Is your focus primarily on taking hateful content down, or are you also pushing around active engagement with underrepresented folks? That was question one. Second question comes from Olaf Steenfeld. He asks, what could regulatory responses in this field look like, particularly in view of the upcoming Digital Services Act in Europe? Can we also think about not only stopping ad spend alongside hate, but also encourage ad spend to remonetize authoritative sources, quote unquote, due prominence? And then the third question in this first round comes from Arden Down, who actually reflects on a very personal experience, which I want to share my personal appreciation for. I think it's very courageous. So his remark is as follows. As a person who was bullied as a child, I cannot imagine how devastating it would have been to be followed home via social media. Is bullying of children a topic you raise with Facebook and others? There's many more questions, but I'll leave it at these three, and feel free to pick a few of them that you want to answer, and then we'll get back to more. Jessica, do you want to start again?
Sure. Thanks so much for all these great questions. I can speak to the first question from David J. We are very focused on takedown of harmful content, but if you look at the Change the Terms policies, which is one of the recommendations that Stop Hate for Profit is making, we actually do give quite a bit of care to making sure that marginalized voices remain up on the platform. We heard a lot from our partners at Change the Terms, especially our Muslim and Black partners, that often they're taken down or marginalized on Facebook or other social media platforms for actually protesting anti-Black racism and Islamophobia. So it was really important for us to have a good vetting system to make sure that wasn't taken down, that kind of content is not taken down. I think I would say the 10 demands are a starting point. No one thinks they're the finish line, and I do think it's really important to focus on amplifying the voices of marginalized communities. Great and important point. On the regulatory response question from Olaf, there's a lot of different things that y'all can do in the EU than we can do here because the First Amendment. Part of the reason, I'm a lawyer by training, and I studied for 10 years, like, what are the US-based regulatory interventions on hate in particular? And it won't be surprising to you that it's somewhat limited in the US context. Of course, there's a lot more y'all can do outside of this country that will probably have global impacts. I don't think Facebook and other big tech companies want to have a different set of policies for every country that they're in. But I would say there's also some remedies that I think are really important to address hate and disinformation on social media that are content neutral, so to speak. So Free Press has a number of proposals on our website, freepress.net, and one of them is to tax big tech, almost like a carbon tax. We're getting filled with hate, not only hate, but like ample amounts of mis and disinformation, and at the same time, many of the advertising revenues that used to fund journalism have moved over to online platforms. That money has not been reinvested in quality journalism, and we've lost between 2008 and 2019. Studies show that we are losing, almost half of journalism jobs here in the U.S. context. So we're recommending that a policy be adopted at the federal level that would tax platforms and redistribute some of that money to independent journalism to correct the record on some of the misinformation. And that's not a stop hate for profit ask. I just want to be clear, but that's one of the things, because Free Press does a lot of work on the role of journalism in holding the powerful accountable, the role of journalism in uplifting the experiences of people of color and other historically oppressed groups. So that's a solution. And I think there's a lot of work to be done on privacy and surveillance capitalism that Facebook plays a heavy role in, that's done a lot of damage in communities. So I am not an international law expert. I don't know, David, if you are, but that's sort of the US-based policies that we've been tossing around over at Free Press. And then for the last one, this one really speaks to me in terms of the harm of being bullied on the playground, and what will this look like. I have two kids who are young enough to not be on social media yet, but this is certainly on our mind. And Common Sense Media, which is a children's advocacy organization, is one of our core partners in this work, because I think this is really serious. Kids cannot escape from harassment. It used to be, and I was someone who was bullied on the schoolyard. I was coming up in California while Prop 187 was moving through the California legislature, and so the anti-Mexican hate was really at a high when I was on the schoolyard. I also can't imagine having my whole social life be inundated with that. And so I know that's a core concern of many of our groups, is how this impacts children. And I think the policies and the demands actually, if followed through on, would have a significant positive impact for children's safety on the web.
Yeah, let me add, I think there's a reason why having a C-level civil rights representation who reports directly to Mark Zuckerberg is the number one demand that we're making. And it's because there are so many parts of this that all come together, and that really are because at its heart, there's just been no real understanding nor participation of people with a deep understanding of the civil rights implications deep into the product and the policy decisions that are being made here. And so, we can go into a variety of the different point solutions, and, we've listed these 10 as like a really good start. But I think it has to come from a deeper recognition that there are deep inequities that aren't even being looked at as products are being developed, as they are being metriced, and then as they're being graded for success criteria today inside of Facebook as a company. And so, when Mark Zuckerberg has to have an entire team of people who come to him and say, no, listen, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, that's actually something that sheriffs back in the Deep South were saying during the civil rights era, Mark, you need to understand that this is a dog whistle. And yet to even get that representation and decide, well, I'm still going to continue to go forward with this anyway. Well, again, what that shows is that there's a need for daily participation inside of the company to make that real change. We're not going to be able to make all of these changes, purely externally. What has to happen here is a change of heart. And I think that so much of that is around people need to become aware of what the impact is of these decisions that, in the end come down to one man. And that's why it's so amazing how such, you can actually see change happen so quickly as well. And so, for us, and also as, someone who has, directly, knowledge of the same, my heart goes out to the questioner who was bullied as a child as well, right? That, words aren't just words on a screen, and that this, we need to have the ability for these folks to be able to not only be heard, but be supported. And then, we have to take a zero tolerance policy around allowing and amplifying these kinds of behaviors that are happening on Facebook.
Thank you so much. The questions keep coming in, including anonymously. So just to point out to anyone who might be hesitant that that's also very well possible. The next question is certainly not anonymous and comes from Roger McNamee, probably well known to many people as author of the book Zucked, and someone who has studied Facebook and other social media platforms for a long time, including for its harm. Roger asks, to what degree do you believe the culture of Silicon Valley plays a role in the pervasiveness of hate speech, disinformation, and conspiracy theories on internet platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter? What has to change? Then I'm going to add a couple of questions, maybe beginning with Mary's question, Mary Steiner, who both comments and asks, in Canada, hate speech is not allowed. How about laws to protect against hate speech? We would be far less violent as a nation with diversity. And then Nikhil asks, Nikhil Vaish, I get Facebook tech platforms' responsibility, and I don't disagree about the power of algorithms. I've seen the real danger with lynchings of Muslims in India, driven entirely by false information shared on WhatsApp. But don't we, as users of these platforms, also have a responsibility to fact check, flag offensive discussions, spend less time on them, and make an effort to look outside our own bubble? And then last question comes from one of the students who also participates in the Wonks and Techies group, Anama Bhatt. She asks, what do you think are appropriate bodies to do independent third-party auditing to measure industry performance on these issues, like NGOs or a private company with a measurement product or government? I'm curious if there's a particular avenue you're already targeting regarding that demand, and what measurement indicators you're thinking about to create these standards. So a cluster of questions really about, who's responsible, and how can we each play our own role? Are there institutions or companies and a culture that has to change? I think a lot of curiosity about, what can real impact look like and what can we each do to make that happen?
Well, I'll certainly take Roger's question here. Hi, Roger. Thanks for the question. Always great to hear from you. Look, I think that, Silicon Valley, at least the Silicon Valley, when I moved here 25 years ago and starting companies, has always had this tremendous spirit of innovation and the spirit of, break things and move fast and, go and, build the things that people say you can't build and, make real impact. And along with it comes, this sort of pseudo-libertarian perspective on things that free speech is good. And you know what it really means is, oh God, I don't want to have to deal with all that stuff. I don't even know how to deal with that stuff. We need to figure out an algorithm to fix this, right? Algorithms, because then human beings aren't involved in all these nitty gritty hard decisions. And we can say, no, it's mathematics, you see. It's not us, it's mathematics. Well, guess what? Then the algorithms start to represent what human beings are doing. And you start seeing this amplification that occurs, not because the algorithm is inherently evil. What you see is that human beings are behaving like human beings. We're predictably irrational. And so when that happens, right, what actually occurs? Well, a whole bunch of these, it's all this pollution that's happening out here. It's all this hate speech that's going on, but that can't have anything to do with us. We're just promoting, what we need is more free speech. What we need is, the answer to this is more speech. Well, guess what? Number one, the damage is already done at this point. Number two, who is it that said that, it takes a lie travels around the world 7 times while the truth is still getting its pants on. So, we can say, of course it's important to be able to fact check. Of course it's important to report things when you see them. But first of all, where's the responsibility of the platform? For years, Silicon Valley has based itself around this idea of our job is to remove friction. Well, guess what? When you remove friction, that's often a good way to make things happen. Transportation happens faster. I get my packages faster. I get my information, I can search at my fingertips. But what does that also mean? It means that disinformation, misinformation, falsehood, threats, harassment, that these things travel faster too. And so, the idea that you are value free because what you are doing is just providing a place for more speech is a childish way of looking at what actually happens in the real world. And yeah, that means that it's part of the technologist's responsibility. It's part of the designer's responsibility to be thinking about the consequences of what they are building. And what we're actually starting to see is some real impact that's going on here too. So I'll offer one. Twitter, for example, recently added a small bit of friction so that if you actually typed in a tweet that looked like it was going to violate their standards, their community standards, which they can, by the way, analyze in the moment using an AI, they'll ask, are you sure? Do you really want to post that? And literally, like, that's the kind of thing that stops a lot of people. Oh, wait, maybe I should take a step back before I actually pile on to that article that I haven't actually even read. Or, that person who has said something that's going to give me that little dopamine burst because, like, it offends me in the moment. And what it then allows us to do is to reduce the impact. So, again, this kind of ethical design is a critical next step, just in the same way that we don't allow anybody to just build slot machines and sell them unless you got to go to Las Vegas, right? How do we think about, as responsible designers and technologists, that we're not just building slot machines for our kids, and just because they're sitting there and they're using it on their phones doesn't make it any less dangerous.
Jessica, thank you. Yeah.
So I can take a crack at Roger's question, though I'd love to hear what he has to say about this, because I'm sure he knows much more deeply the problems with the culture in Silicon Valley. I'm in LA, but I am in the Valley quite often, or at least I used to be before the pandemic. This may be unpopular, but Silicon Valley has a whiteness problem. It's in its own echo chamber. It's in its own environment where it grew up in a place that was historically very brown, historically very low income, right? And so Menlo Park itself, I have a friend who grew up in Menlo Park, and his parents still own a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. And around them, there's just mega mansions being built everywhere. And he used to tell, he told me, like, the school right down the street was like, most of the kids were on the free lunch program when we were growing up. And so despite that it is in an incredibly diverse state, I think there is not enough accountability and, frankly, enough people of color who are running companies and are making power plays, so are able to actually hold big tech executives accountable. And I think that's why the civil rights position, and not just any old civil rights position at Facebook, but someone who's in the C-suite and has enough cachet and sway and power to either hold Facebook accountable or decide, you know what, they're not being accountable, I'm out, and I'm going to make some noise about that. So again, I'm not an expert on the culture there, but when I talk to other women of color and people of color who are deep into the culture there, I think there is, it has its own echo chamber that needs to be addressed. And I certainly see this in this free speech or free expression conversation where I often wonder, whose speech are we talking about? Is this just people who've traditionally held power in our society? Because that seems like, until recently, the main voices that we're trying to, represent in that frame. I'm just trying to track all the other questions. Again, I'd love to hear what.
Okay, I'll
Roger.
do that. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. On the responsibility piece, sure, I think we have a responsibility. I think there's probably some, new age media literacy that needs to happen. Like I used to be a teacher too. I could talk to you about the state of civics in our public schools. But I think at the end of the day, Facebook does have a responsibility to its users and advertisers, and it's not meeting that responsibility.
Yeah, it's so striking how much the words power, responsibility, and lack of accountability keep coming back. So I feel like that's a real common thread. What I'll do is I'll highlight the points that are made in the remaining questions, and then give you an opportunity both to reflect on those and to say some last words that you feel like haven't been addressed properly yet, or that you want to close off with, because we're already running up against the clock, even if I feel like we just got started. So I have two questions from Anna Gibson. She asks, as you point out, a better Facebook is only possible through the benevolence of Mark Zuckerberg. Even if these recommendations, so your recommendations, are enacted, we remain at his mercy. How can we address this structural challenge? And then she continues, do you see any tension between the requirements for user safety and brand safety on Facebook, or do you think they're perfectly aligned? Then I saw another question, which I think was very important. It's now removed, but the question was, what about smaller platforms like 8chan and 4chan? And, if some of these neo-Nazistic hate groups, discriminating, anti-Semitic, anti-LGBTQ, what have you, groups are no longer welcome on Facebook, which I think is a very commonsensical thing to do if you're running a community. But where might they go, and what sort of harm could come from that sort of more underground position? Then an anonymous attendee asks, some have proposed banning political advertising, as Twitter has done, as one response to the polarization and hate associated with modern electoral campaigns. Others suggest that such a policy would disproportionately affect advocates and activists who rely on digital ads. Where is the appropriate balance? Then another question is about demands for more robust removal and downranking of content. I think it's a little bit confusing what the question says, but what do you think are the pros and cons of using defined minority groups as the metric of measuring potential harms? Now, I'll leave it at that, just because the questions keep coming in at a speed that will not allow for answers. So I'm so sorry for those who couldn't have their questions included. Maybe you can reflect on this. So what alternative avenues, how about the power structures within Facebook? Are we at the mercy of one person, or is there a better way out? Anything else that you may want to pick up from political advertising, downranking, and the demands that you have? Lots there that people want to learn more about. Thank you.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot of questions in a relatively short amount of time. So I figure I can speak at least to a few. With regards to the deplatforming questions, right? So what happens, with people who are on 4chan, 8chan, Gab, and the like? And first of all, let's talk that there's a false equivalency here. I mean, we're talking about groups on Facebook right now that are being recommended to people who are not part of these groups because of the collaborative filtering recommendation system that they have. So, they're in effect allowing for the normalization and recruiting of people into alt-right and white extremism and Holocaust denialism and anti-Muslim and anti-Latinx and all sorts of groups where they then organize. And just recently, there were allegedly two individuals who met through one of these groups, and then went and decided to join the Boogaloo, right? This idea of a race war, a civil war, and allegedly came to Oakland, California. I mean, this is not far away from all of us, to perform a terrible act of violence on a federal officer. And so there's real impact here. Now, we're not saying that there aren't going to be dark corners of the web where people are going to organize, but let's stop the recruiting, shall we? Let's stop making it easy for people to join these groups. right? Like, no one's going to take away their free speech rights. They want to start their own website and they want to be able to talk all they want on it. Great, right? But why do we have to give them the power, right? As Renee DiResta said, right, freedom of speech does not equate to freedom of reach. And this is what we're talking about here, right? So people can still say whatever they want, and they can do it on their own websites, but they don't have to be doing it on the largest social platforms. And their speech doesn't need to become normalized this way. And this is the responsibility that the platforms have.
Thank you. A key point. Jessica.
Yeah, I just couldn't agree more with that point on recruitment. You know, we know that white supremacist groups have a very targeted strategy of offboarding Facebook and Twitter users onto darker places on the web. And so Twitter and Facebook and those platforms are critical for them to gather and increase their ranks and to mainstream their very extreme views on a number of subjects. On the down ranking question, like, I'm super open to like, what are the innovative solutions that tech companies can put in place? Like, we're seeing a lot of different companies, and especially the sort of next tier down from the big tech giants, experiment with different strategies to help weed out or at least flag or interrupt the normalization of bigotry on their platform. So, you know, depending on what that looks like and what the impacts are, and I think this will remain in flux. You're never going to have a final answer. Like, society adapts, and tech will have to adapt to meet the moment. And on the benevolence question, like, fair point. And that's why, for me, I believe in the power of organizing. I believe that is what Stop Hate for Profit's done. That's what Change the Terms continues to do. And that's what a number of our groups, like, that's why we're here. We have to get organized. We have to get clear on the harms, and then we have to push for solutions. And I really do. I mean, I think if anything, Stop Hate for Profit shows that organizing works, and we won't be stopping on that front.
Well, what a great and empowering note to end on. Let me really thank both of you for spending your time, sharing your thoughts, and answering so many questions. I feel like the many questions and the many facets of this complex ecosystem of challenges in the business model, in the incentive structure, in the way in which minorities deserve to be protected, in the way in which laws should apply online as they do offline, would merit many more discussions, which I hope we'll have. From our part on the part of the Cyber Policy Center at Stanford, one of the things that we're particularly keen on doing is really shedding light on the facts that are yet unknown, so that we can have a better informed debate. I think a lot of the core examples that are so striking about what happens on these social media platforms have only come to light after whistleblowers, after investigative journalists, after people came forward with their own experiences, and after some bits and pieces of academic research, but certainly not systematic transparency, which is, I think, the first step to getting to more systematic accountability and a better informed public debate, better informed policies, and the necessary checks and balances to these very powerful actors like Facebook. Those were some of my personal thoughts at the end of this hour. There's another opportunity to join us for a webinar again tomorrow, which will deal with cyber peace. The information is coming up now. Thank you so much, David, who's putting that up for us. But for now, I hope everybody will join me in a warm but virtual applause for Jessica and David. Thank you so much for spending your time, and keep up the important work with Stop Hate for Profit and Change the Terms. Thanks a lot, and have a good day.